thank you for having me, and thank you, Masako and Thomas, for giving me this very special opportunity. So I'm Sei Shishido from Seikei University, which is in Tokyo, Japan. And today I'm presenting based on my paper published in July, which is in Japanese. And the purpose of my paper was that was very first article of my series of like research projects. So I'm still working on it, and I'm not done yet. So the purpose of my paper was to analyze how self-referencing can be assessed as exclusionary conduct by dominant undertakings under the current Japanese legal framework. And so why I did this research was like, I wanted to know what can we do with what we have so far. And I also wanted to know if we need a new tool or new frameworks or like new legal standards to assess self-referencing under the competition laws. And I'm still working on this research. I'm not done yet. So I'm just presenting what I've learned so far today. And hopefully I can finish another paper next year and submit to actual Ascola. Can I say that?
Ascola Global.
And since I still have a lot to study, I would be glad if you have any comments or suggestions for my research. I'll be very happy. So anyways, let's get into the intro. First, I will explore the academic background and sort out the problems regarding exclusionary conduct by digital platforms. Then I will explain the research method I used in this paper, and also I will explain why I wrote this paper. So, okay, first of all, I will go through the Japanese legal framework regarding exclusionary conduct. Japanese Anti-Monopoly Act has Article 2.5, which prohibits the exclusion of the business activities of other undertakings as a private monopolization. The academic challenge here is how to distinguish between normal competition from a bad exclusion, which is prohibited by Article 2.5. And basically, we have been arguing about how to distinguish bad exclusions from good ones in Japan. And I assume that this is the same as in Europe and in the US. And in the context of digital platforms, this question can be much more complex. And the first point is that there is a specific importance of data. Since database technologies have been dramatically developed in the last few decades, it allows platforms to collect vast amounts of data with a super high quality. In addition to the increasing the quality and quantity of data, you can analyze the data, vast amount of data. And so which means the tools to analyze data have been developed. And data has therefore become an important factor to compete in a digital platform market. And another economic characteristic is that direct network effect because of the multi-sidedness of the platforms. And because of the nature of the digital platform, there will be a greater, bigger economies of scale and economies of scope. A phone call from the United States. Confused. So yes. Okay, so because of these characteristics specific to digital platforms, the competitive environment for digital platforms have become increasingly focused on how to achieve minimum efficient scale, or like how to use data. Thus, the importance of data exploitation and the economic characteristics inherent in digital platforms are factors that make it the most rational choice for operators to act differently than in the normal marketplace. And using data become one of the most important factors of the competition because of the recent development of technologies, as I mentioned. And so basically what I wanted to say here is the competition, like competitive behavior in the digital platform market have been changed. Like it is different from other like offline platform market. And so therefore, because of the characteristics of digital platforms, competition authorities and courts must consider both sides of the platform to analyze the exclusionary effect or like anti-competitive effect of the conduct by digital platforms. And in addition, since monopoly of information may itself like if some digital platforms have too much data, may itself create a competitive advantage. So aggregation of data might also affect competition. And because of these characteristics, the market definition and the proof of market power can be very difficult regarding the market of digital platforms. It means defining a bad exclusion can be very difficult because of the characteristics of digital platforms. And in recent years, both practice and academia have called for new and proper legal standards for exclusionary conduct by digital platforms. And that is why so many academic articles have addressed the issue regarding the exclusion by digital platforms over the last few years. And there are two main programs specific to the exclusionary conduct by digital platforms. The first one is a type of conduct that has traditionally been known to have a negative effect to the competition. So, such as predatory pricing in a multi-sided platform can be a good example. So, in this case, the optimal pricing for the platforms can be lower than the marginal cost, because of the indirect network effect. And this means you can't really tell if it has an anti-competitive effect or not by merely comparing price and cost. So, which is basically you can't assess the effect of the conduct by a traditional framework. And the other type of problem is that the exclusion through new theories of harms. Specific characteristics of digital platforms that I mentioned may cause anti-competitive effects through new mechanisms that could not have been imagined before. So even though these types of conducts were never thought to have a negative effect, the biggest problem of type 2 is the self-preferencing so far. So we never imagined that it could be a violation of an antitrust law if it's done by offline platforms. So in this research, I'm going to analyze self-preferencing by digital platforms as an analogy to the monopoly leveraging theory, which was argued almost 30 years ago. And through this analysis, I will try to reconsider the current legal standard, which corresponding with the paradigm of RRC and predation. And the reason why I wrote this paper was so there are so many legislations recently against digital platforms, and those legislations have some common feature. These legislations have clauses to make the digital platforms to stop preferencing their own services. The controversy behind these legislation is whether competition law can address the issue of self-preferencing by its traditional legal framework. Furthermore, some of these legislations appear to have been enacted without clarifying the question of whether competition law can address the issue, like such as concentration of data or concentration of power, as Leon mentioned. And so there are very difficult questions and not easy to answer. So, however, it might be possible for me to analyze the existing theories or like legal standards under and clarify what Japanese competition law can address within the current legal framework. I may be able to do that. So I wrote this paper to consider how we should develop an interpretation of the word exclusion under the Articles 2.5 of the Japanese Anti-Monopoly Act. And so it's kind of a conclusion, but we might need to extend the interpretation when the characteristics of digital platforms have a significant effect on market competition, or like even we might need a new paradigm, like other than RRC or predation, to analyze the self-preferencing kind of conduct. So let's move on to the next section. So far, I have talked about the characteristics of specific characteristics of digital platforms, and this will be the key of my research. So from now on, I would like to discuss cases in which the characteristics of digital platforms may have like negative impact on competition, like even though this type of activity has not been considered to have a negative effect in the past, like traditionally. So this is what I called type 2 and in the previous slides. So the problem of type 2 is referred to in the report by the OECD 4 years ago as a new forms of abuse. The report by OECD refers to 3 types of conducts as new abuses. One is abusive leverage and self-preferencing, and forced free riding. And the third one is privacy policy tying. And so I will go through all of these conduct later, but all of these have a common nature, which is the diversion of power or some kind of competitive advantage from one place to another. Like one place means like from the monopolistic market from the other market to the other market, or like it can be from one side of the platform to the other side of the platform. The same feature can be seen in a case of predatory innovation also. So I added the predatory innovation to the list of my research. So this study examines this kind of diversion of power as a diversion of power by digital platforms as an analogy of monopoly leverage. In a broad sense, the leverage of monopoly is the diversion of market power or like competitive advantage in one market to gain another competitive advantage in elsewhere. And many of the activities of digital platforms that have considered as an exclusion under Japanese law are the conduct that transfers the market power or like dominance or a competitive advantage gained through collecting data to gain a competitive advantage elsewhere. So there used to be tons of arguments regarding monopoly leverage in the US, back in 1980s. And Chicago schools believe in the single monopoly profit theory, and they argued that the leverage of the monopoly has no negative effect on the market. And later, with the development of economics, the top Chicago school criticized the Chicago school and argued that it is possible that monopoly leverage can be a successful anti-competitive strategy in the real actual cases, and based on specific conditions, under the specific conditions. And under current United States law, antitrust law, if you simply leverage a monopoly from one market to another, it is not an antitrust problem. The general view in the United States, according to like Arida or Hovencom, is that the antitrust issue arises only when the monopoly leverage was conducted by some like unfair methods, such as an RRC strategy. On the other hand, the EU, especially the European Commission, has a different view. The European Commission seems to be okay with prohibiting the simple. It seems to be okay with prohibiting the mere acquisition of competitive advantage in the second market. And this is the case, for example, with Google Shopping's case in 2017. The general court also distinguished the leverage from the refusal to deal as an independent abuse. And as you can see, the academic debate over leveraging theory is still going on. In particular, it remains open whether mere diversion of power completed without typical anti-competitive conduct can be an antitrust violation. And I call this kind of like simple like leverage of the power I call it naked leverage sometimes. And this is because the mere acquisition of a competitive advantage in the second market does not immediately lead to negative effects based on consumer welfare standards, such as higher prices or lower outputs. And in addition to that, the economic effects of this type of leverage are not fully known. And even assuming a standard other than the consumer welfare standard, there is no clear answer as to whether that mere diversion of power should be illegal under the Japanese competition law. So conducts similar to the naked leverage have actually been addressed in the Facebook case in the US and the Slovak telecom case in the EU. In Slovak case, the court concluded that discriminatory setting of terms in contract against a competitor were abusive. And the court found that the conduct consisted in a different kind of abuse, which is discrimination, rather than a constructive refusal to deal. And that is the reason why the ECJ did not apply the legal test from Oscar Bronner case to this Slovak case. And in the US, in the Facebook case, the FTC had argued that the adoption of a platform policy that made it less convenient for users of the platform was conditional dealing, and it violates the law. So that's the FTC's argument. And there were several reasons behind it, but basically the court rejected the argument by FTC and showed that this kind of conduct does not constitute an independent form of exclusion, like independent illegal conduct under Section 2 of the Antitrust of the Sherman Act. And these are some recent examples of how the naked leverage-ish conducts are analyzed under the EU and the US competition laws. So the report by the OECD explained that abusive leverage and self-preferencing are new forms of abuse. And usually self-preferencing or simply leveraging the power is not the problem of competition law. And generally, it doesn't matter if you have a competitive advantage over the other bidders. And most companies have no obligation to share their advantages with competitors or to create a neutral, they're not obliged to create a neutral competitive environment under typical competition laws. Rather, it is well known that neutralizing the competitive advantages can have a negative impact on the economy. However, given the characteristics specific to digital platforms, there might be cases where naked leverage, which normally would not be a problem, will possibly have negative effects on the welfare under specific conditions. Some Japanese economists also showed a few examples of that situation. And also you can find some examples of anti-competitive self-preferencing from the House Antitrust Report, or from the Google shopping case in the EU. So let's look at the Google shopping case to see what kind of theories of harm could be possible for self-preferencing. The European Commission suggested two types of theories of harm, and the General Court accepted both of them in its decision. The first one is called discrimination, and it was based on the concept of purgation. The Commission and the Court focused on the fact that the conduct was abnormal in light of Google's business model as a search engine provider. And this can be understood as an implicit application of no economic sense test. In fact, there was an article pointed out the same thing. And another theory of harm is called leverage in a case. And based on the concept of RRC, the court found that Google upgraded its own service by increasing visibility of own CSS, which is a shopping service, and demoted competing services by decreasing their visibility. Based on these facts, the court concluded that these set of conducts have had a negative impact on consumers and caused lower traffic to competing CSS services. So in short, what the European Commission did here is that explaining the theories of harm of self-preferencing through both concepts of predation and RRC, and the General Court approved this explanation. As I mentioned, some articles observed that the court's analysis regarding discrimination type of theories of harm can be read as an application of no economic sense test. And there is criticisms that it makes it harder to prove the anti-competitive effect of self-preferencing. Regarding the analysis of theories of harm based on the concept of RRC, it is also unclear whether the proof of anti-competitive effect is possible without both upgrading and demoting of the services, or whether one or the other is enough to accept the effect. And actually, the expert testimony submitted by Google was dismissed because it didn't mention to demoting. And of course, this is not enough information to say that the court always requires demoting for self-purposing as an RRC strategy, but that's one example. And another type of new form of abuse is called privacy policy tying. the scenario here is to integrate and use consumer data collected in markets where it has a dominant position with user data collected in markets where it does not have a dominant position. And in order to compete effectively in the former market. So the point is that the conduct is different from the usual leverage, because in this scenario, the dominant company uses its advantage in the market where it has a monopoly power to collect data in other market, and which it doesn't have any power or advantage. And it uses those data collected from other market to expand its competitive advantage in the market it already has the power. So basically, this scenario, the platforms trying to gain more competitive advantage in the market already has the market power. And this strategy includes the price cutting, like low pricing in some markets, but it is clear that it is distinguished from the case of predatory pricing. And its anti-competitive effect is explained as a RRC strategy, not predation. And another one is called forced free riding. Typical example of forced free riding is a content scraping and appropriation. Content scraping is you'll know about it. Content scraping is the concept of extracting content from restaurant review sites and displaying it on its own search result pages, like Google Maps or whatever. And famous appropriation is the Amazon basics. So Amazon took data from sellers and buyers on their platform and used those data to mimic the feature of popular products. The anti-competitive effect of forced free riding is the undermining of competitors' incentive to innovate downstream of the market by appropriating their innovations. And it is pointed out by Shalansky that this effect can be caused even without infringing intellectual property rights. And also product design or changes as predation.
Sorry to interrupt, you probably want to wrap up. Yeah, it's been, yeah. Cool.
Okay. Okay, so here are some takeaways. Yeah. Actually, I fixed my slide, so I don't use these slides anymore. So that's why I'm looking at my computer. But so here are some takeaways. So the anti-competitive effect of leverage can be different from its strategy. And it is important to consider what kind of strategy behind the self-preferencing. And it might be able to explain it as a refusal of the deal or discrimination against a rival, or it can be explained under the scenario of privacy policy tying, or other forced free riding scenario. And at least there is no rationale to prohibit self-preferencing per se, and it can have various effects in both negative and positive ways, according to economists. And there also might be a situation in which you can, And so here are some conclusions. New kinds of abuse by digital platforms, including self-preferencing, can be understood as a leverage of the power or competitive advantage from one place to another. And under the current legal framework, we need to consider the effect based on the theories of harm based on RRC or predation scenarios. But there is no rationale or reason to limit the scope of competition law, Japanese competition law, to the exclusion based on RRC or predation only. And we might be able to use other paradigms or tools to analyze the self-preferencing. And there are some, so these are some takeaways from my research, and I'm still working on it. Yeah, if you have any comments, I'll be glad. Thank you.